Welcome to the Intel Hub News Brief, uncovering the cold hard truth that the corporate media just can't handle. A service of the IntelHub.com. Now, here's Joe Joseph from Freedom Link Radio and Popeye from Federal Jack.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Intel Hub News Brief. Tonight, myself, Popeye from FederalJack.com, and my friend Joe Joseph from the Freedom Link Radio program are going to be discussing a topic that will probably make you have nightmares after you hear this, and it should scare you. And my goal is to not bring the fear, but to bring a warning. And
an awareness, Papa. I mean,
yes.
People need to be aware that this crap is going on.
Well, I mean, Joe, the stuff that's going on is just unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're talking about is bioethics. Now, Joe, bioethics. When you hear that word, what does it make you think of? It makes me think of, things that we shouldn't be testing on other human beings. We should have ethics about what we're doing to other human beings, i.e. testing weapons or testing vaccines and stuff. And I believe this is a presidential commission, correct?
Yes, it is. It's the Presidential Commission on Bioethical Issues. And this was enacted by executive order in 2009 by President Obama to discuss if the things that they're doing are ethical or not. That's really what it comes down to.
They already know they're not ethical.
Right. So, folks, the website, bioethics.gov, and if you go there, it's a treasure trove of information. It really is. It's scary. It's downright scary. And they talk about everything from STD testing down in Guatemala, the synthetic biology, to testing directed energy weapons on the public, to testing vaccines on our children, dangerous ones. So, I mean, this podcast is all about that. So the first part I think we should focus on, dude, is these non-lethal weapons or directed energy weapons that they had a meeting on, and it was meeting number 4 of this presidential commission. There's a lot of public testimony in regards to this. But what's funny, Popeye, is we did some snooping, and I actually came up and I found the DoD Non-Lethal Weapon Handbook. It's a very interesting book, folks. I suggest you just look it up, the DoD Non-Lethal Weapon Handbook. Now, I'm going to give you a little background on this. The DoD Non-Lethal Weapon Program was established to provide warfighters with non-lethal weapons that support the full range of military operations. The program began in 1996 as a congressional initiative. DoD Directive 3000.3 establishes policy and assigns responsibility for the DoD Non-Lethal Weapon Program. It is DoD policy that non-lethal weapons will, and now this is some of the bullet points to non-lethal weapons. And there's one that's going to stand out to you folks, and I'll save that for last. So the first one is non-lethal weapons should be designed to help decrease the post-conflict costs of reconstruction. That sounds good. Non-lethal weapons availability shall not limit a commander's inherent authority or obligation to use all necessary means available and to take all appropriate actions in self-defense. That makes sense. Non-lethal weapons presence, nor the potential effect of non-lethal weapons, shall constitute an obligation for their employment or a higher standard for employment of force than provided for by applicable law. Okay, so far so good. Non-lethal weapons may be used in conjunction with lethal weapon systems to enhance the latter's effectiveness and efficiency in military operations. Okay, and last, and certainly not least, folks, keep your hats on for this one. Non-lethal weapons shall not be required to have zero probability of producing fatalities or permanent injuries. Popeye, how is it a non-lethal weapon?
Could you repeat that one more time, just for the listener?
Non-lethal weapons shall not be required to have zero probability of producing fatalities or permanent injuries. Popeye, a .357 Magnum will not kill somebody each time you shoot somebody with it.
Yeah, if I shoot somebody in the foot with a .357, I guess you can consider that a non-lethal weapon.
It is a non-lethal weapon by definition.
Under that train of thought, you know what I mean?
That's right. According to DOD Directive 3000.3, your .357 Magnum is a non-lethal weapon. That's right. Your 12-gauge shotgun is a non-lethal weapon. Hell, a 40-millimeter grenade is a non-lethal weapon. And what do you know? What do you know, folks? In this handbook, they use 40-millimeter grenades as non-lethal munitions. Hell, they have mortars as non-lethal munitions.
And people are going to say, Joe, how the hell could you use a 40-millimeter grenade as a non-lethal weapon?
Well, because it's defined as such in here. Because
and it's scary if you look at what it is that they're using it for. Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you look up the Taser X-Rep. It is a taser, a shotgun shell with a taser, basically built inside of it. They fire it out of a shotgun. The projectile can travel, I think it's like 75 or 80 feet or whatever it is in a straight line. And when it hits you, not only does it knock you down for 30 seconds, but if you try to pull it off because of the way it's set up, as soon as you pull the wire, it charges you, it hits you again. So picture that on steroids, because that's what this thing is. This is what the title of it is. 40-millimeter human electromuscular incapacitation projectile. You want to hear the description? Check it out. A 40-millimeter non-tethered hemi-munition with increased distance over currently available tethered devices from 10 to 100 meter threshold and 10 to 250 meter objective, with 30-second threshold and 3-minute objective duration. Related efforts are Harbinger and Disable Point target programs. And the concept of employment, meaning what they would use it for, is force protection, entry control points, crowd control, patrols, and other defensive and offensive operations. One other scary non-lethal munition besides the 40-millimeter, taser round, as it were, there's also riot shields that will suffocate protesters with sound waves. That's right. Riot shields that will suffocate. Suffocate. Say it one more time. Riot shields will suffocate protesters with sound waves. It's an article from RT on this, and this actually dates back to December 21st of 2011. This came out, and not many people, some people paid attention to it, but not many people really, were paying too much attention at the time. It was a couple of days before Christmas. Law enforcement can already beat protesters with batons, spray subversive chemicals into their eyeballs, shoot rubber bullets at a speed of around 10 yards per second, and blast deafening sound bursts. So why then shouldn't they be able to suffocate protesters? Stop somebody from being able to breathe? Well, that's the very question that Raytheon, the defense contractor and missile manufacturer that is longtime pals and has connections to the Pentagon, it seems to think it can answer with one new piece of protester-proof riot gear. They're calling it a man-portable non-lethal pressure shield, and its effects could have you contesting to catch your breath. Okay. Move over, LRAD, the new pressure shield in the works from the DoD allies that brought you such classics as the BGM-109 Tomahawk subsonic cruiser and the Phalanx CIWS anti-ship missile defense system stands to be the next step in crowd control and could give your local policeman a whole new way to deal with those pesky Occupy hippies and their silly pleas of ending corrupt Wall Street corporate personhood. This upcoming addition to the arsenal brings with it a whole new way of beating down protesters. The shield, by sending out a series of pulsed pressure beams, resonates the upper respiratory tract of the victim, and depending on which setting is chosen by the officer, can render them warned, stunned, or incapacitated. Now, I would, if you're screwing with the upper respiratory tract, that means that they could stun you and like someone choked you. I guess the warning would be a choke. A stun would probably be a longer choking feeling, and an incapacitation is knocking, the breath out of your respiratory tract. We're knocking breath out of people's lungs because they're protesting what, they're protesting. You protest against the Federal Reserve, you'll get this used on you. The Occupy protesters, whoever. And it's in the Constitution that you're allowed to protest, and yet we have the DOD working with defense contractors and everything else to make these weapons, and out comes this thing for quote-unquote police, the militarized police. By blasting waves of mixed force and threshold, the users of the shield can tiptoe the line that borders on discomfort for the victim but also teeters dangerously close to eardrum rupture and lung damage. Eardrum rupture and lung damage, not or, and. Even the weakest blast of less than 10 G at a close enough distance will be able to penetrate the pain threshold with barely 140 decibels of sound. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, if you can't see what's going on, militarized police, that's another issue by itself. When I was a kid, the cops used to walk around with, the beat. They used to know everybody, even if they had cruisers. They knew the people that lived in town. Nowadays, it's, stormtrooper outfits, and they don't know anybody in town. They don't care to know anybody in town. Everybody's a possible terrorist. Unacceptable.
Now, what's interesting about this, Popeye, is we're not only talking about your standard non-lethal military issue munitions. We're also talking about directed energy technology in the sense of mind control and other top secret DoD and CIA programs, all that are being tested on the public without their consent. And that's what this meeting 4 was all about. This meeting 4 had to do with the fact that this stuff is going on, and is it ethical or not that the public not know about it? So I want to bring up a testimony from Dr. John Hall from Texas. Now, I'm reading directly from the transcript, folks. You can find this at bioethics.gov, and this is highlighted. A lot of this testimony is highlighted in the Intel Hub article on this presidential commission. And it says, "My name is Dr. John Hall. I'm a medical doctor from Texas. As I understand the memorandum from the president, it is for you to determine if current legislation is adequate in protecting individuals and if there's any ongoing experimentation. In reviewing the common rule, it is very obvious that there is a lot of loopholes to informed consent. All of the horrific experiments you have mentioned, Willowbrook, MKUltra, radiation experiments, mostly were done without informed consent. They were funded by the DoD and intelligence agencies, where I am not even so sure you would know if there is an independent review board, much less if an independent review board is looking at informed consent. As a physician, relative to some of what you are hearing today, in the community, we are seeing an alarming rate of complaints of use of electromagnetic weapons, microwave auditory effects, silent sound spectrum, EEG cloning, which has taken the lab out of the laboratory and into the home. Most of these, from the research that we have reviewed, can be done remotely. It seems to be more weapons research than medical research. I personally corresponded with upwards of 1,500 victims, all complaining of identical complaints from every state in the nation of being exposed to electromagnetic radiation, non-ionizing radiation, for the use of cognitive control or behavior control." Now, folks, I just want to put this in perspective for you, because I'm sure that this has been going on for quite some time. But if you take a look at history, especially over the last 20 years, look at the jump in the amount of antidepressants that are being prescribed in the United States today. and how much depression has taken hold of this country. Now, mind you, there is a lot that has to do with the economy, and that the current situation of our country really isn't favorable. But I will tell you this: back when times were good, people were being put on antidepressants in droves, and it's no different today. And one has to wonder if this doesn't have something to do with that.
Well, Joe, they test all sorts of vaccines and quote-unquote medications and everything else on people. They do have to have human test subjects. And a lot of times people say, but Popeye, come on, people sign up. Yeah, but it's called informed consent. They're not fully told what they're testing. You know, it's like when you see these kids or even adults that, teenagers or adults that they sign up to these clinics and stuff, and they test drugs and they get paid like $200 or $300.
Yeah.
What do you think that is? That's human testing.
Right.
Do you think they're telling those people? They ask them, let us know what kind of side effects you have. They don't tell them what to expect.
And what's funny that you say that, because today the American Medical Association, if you go and look at the American Medical Association blog, folks, you'll find quite often throughout this blog that they talk about mandatory vaccinations, because they're having problems finding people now that will do this. They're running out of people to do this. They can't gather scientific data or credible scientific data on these vaccines. So what they're saying is, in the American Medical Association blog, they're saying that perhaps we should go to a system similar to military conscription, whereby people are mandatorily, let's just say, drafted to test a vaccine for the common good of society, regardless of, who cares about your personal safety or risks? You know what I mean? All that aside, you're doing it for the good of the whole, baby, of the collective. So you know what? Shoot 'em up. You know what, bartender? Make it a double. I'm feeling lucky today. And here's the problem, is that you've got the Department of Health and Human Services going along with this. So let me bring this up, because this is very important. And if you have children, you should be extremely concerned about this. But this was a letter that Kathleen Sebelius wrote to Amy Gutmann, who is the chair of this presidential commission, on January 6th of 2012. And they are all appointed by Obama. So here we go. It says the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is responsible for developing and stockpiling safe and effective medical countermeasures to protect the nation from bioterror attacks. While it has made significant progress towards this goal for adults, the development of appropriate medical countermeasures for children lags in part due to challenges. Remember that word, folks. Challenges in collecting basic dose and immunogenicity studies in pediatric populations. So on October 28th, 2011, the Health and Human Services National Biodefense Science Board released its report and recommendation on the challenges in use of anthrax vaccines absorbed in the pediatric population as a component of post-exposure prophylaxis. Now, folks, look this up. Look that report up. That's the NBSB's report, and it's titled Challenges in the Use of Anthrax Vaccines Absorbed in the Pediatric Population as a Component of Post-Exposure Prophylaxis. And read the report, because your jaw will drop. The NBSB debated how best to obtain scientifically valid safety and immunogenicity data about AVA-PEP for children, a complex issue with ethical, scientific, medical, legal, regulatory, and administrative challenges. In a partridge in a pear tree. In the recommendation, the NBSB concludes that it would be in the best interests of children to gather safety and immunogenicity data about the anthrax vaccine prior to an anthrax event, rather than during a future crisis when the vaccine may be needed. Because God forbid, folks, let's stop here for a second. Let's make one thing abundantly clear. There are only a few places in the world that can make a weaponized form of anthrax. So the first thing that you need to understand is that these people that get shipped this white powder in an envelope is complete and total horse crap. It's crap.
There's no way that some, moron in a cave could refine anthrax down to the size specifically needed to be weaponized. It's impossible for people to buy this crap. It just goes to show you that the general public doesn't pay attention, Joe, and that they're willing to believe what the government tells them,
Right. So if there is going to be some sort of event like this on our soil that's so widespread and affects so many people, the only way that's going to happen, folks, to be quite honest with you, is if our government does it to us ourselves, which, as we know, because the Bioethics Committee has already said out in the open that they test stuff on us without our consent, would now this be above any sort of expectation? Is it unbelievable at this point? And the answer clearly is no. And so what they're pushing for now in this arena, and I'm sure they're going to have a meeting on this at some point in time, is, let's see, is it ethical to test this stuff on children, considering, all this and the informed consent thing? Maybe we should get around that. Is it ethical to do that? I mean, is there a debate here, dude? Really?
No, there's no debate, Joe. And this isn't new, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. I suggest you all do your homework and see what's going on here, because this is something that's been going on for a very long time. I mean, I'm talking about going back, to World War II,
right,
at the very least, that we know about.
That's okay? Right.
Remember, we used to have really whacked out eugenics laws in this country, Joe. A lot of people
Absolutely.
forget American history. They hear eugenics, they go, God, what kind of barbaric people would do such things? We did, right here in the United States of America. Right up until the early 1900s, I may add. Okay?
That's right.
Right into the early 20, the beginning of the 20th century, we were doing some of this crap. And by the way, we're still doing it. You're just not told about it. Remember the Tuskegee Airmen, Joe, that were the all-black Army Air Force? Well, I don't want to say Army Air Force. Army Air Corps is what they were known as, because the Air Force didn't exist back then. And they were given syphilis. These guys were, fighter pilots. They flew for their country. They were active duty and, later on veterans, but these guys there was nothing different about them than anybody else, except they were black. So racism again with the elites, and these guys, they were chosen, against their will. I shouldn't even say
not
against
even
their will. Yeah, without
will.
their consent. Again,
Right.
Without informed consent, and they were given shots, and some of them got sick and died.
Right, and then in the 1940s, you had the STD experiments down in Guatemala, where people were just given STDs without their consent. Oh yeah, let's just use them as a controlled study. I mean, you're talking about people, human beings.
And you know who's behind a lot of this that funds it? And you can research this yourself, ladies and gentlemen. The Rockefeller family.
Oh, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, yes.
Yep. You'll see that they actually did that in Puerto Rico.
And if you think it's a conspiracy, folks, if you think that this is a conspiracy, you would be correct. It is most certainly a conspiracy. The only thing that's missing from that is theory. There's no theory here, because everything that we're telling you today comes directly from the horse's mouth. If you need to go and look this stuff up, by all means, let your journey begin at bioethics.gov, where you have a treasure trove of information at your fingertips, and just go from there. Dive down the rabbit hole and find out exactly what's been going on, not just now, but like Popeye said, for the last 100 years or so. And you're going to come to find out that things really aren't as rosy as you might think, that life isn't as good as you might think, that it could be, perhaps, 180 degrees out of phase from what you think it is. So it's time to open your eyes and wake up and fight back. Don't allow this to happen anymore, especially for your children. Just remember, folks, how bad is it now? How bad do you think it's going to be when your children are older and grow up? Can you possibly fathom it? I know I can't. Popeye?
Yeah, well, I don't have kids myself, but I do this for all the people that do have children. I don't want to leave the future generations a police state and just this utter mess that I don't want to say inherited, but the baby boomer generation had the chance to stop this, and because they were so mesmerized and brainwashed, they didn't. And now it's our generation's turn to stand up and stop this, because if we don't, we are going to, without a doubt, leave the next generation a complete and utter dystopian police state. And
that's right.
I can't in good conscience do that.
No.
So if I can do one thing and leave my mark in this world, it will be to stop the New World Order dead in its tracks and bury it 6 feet under permanently, never to rise again, ever.
Amen to that. Amen to that, bro. So, folks, pay attention. Tune in to Orion Talk Radio to Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye on Wednesdays and Fridays from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. and Sundays from 5 to 7 p.m. And then Freedom Link Radio on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 10 p. to 12 a. and Sundays from 7 p. to 9 p.m. And go to the Intel Hub for your news and information, as we will be tracking this stuff and giving you any updates onto this. Remember, the next meeting is next week. Today is the 28th of January. On the 2nd and 3rd of February, they're having another meeting, and this meeting is on the privacy of the human genome. Do you have the right to privacy regarding your genetic structure? That's the question. So, folks, stay tuned, pay attention, and anything else to add there, Popeye?
Well, I just want the people to, this isn't a science fiction novel. This is real. This is happening today in front of you.
Yes.
And if you don't stand up and do something, it's going to get worse. I mean, I know it's scary, but what if you don't do anything? If you think this is bad, if you don't do anything, it's going to be 1,000 times worse. So, if this bothers you, then not doing something and the prospect of what is going to come out of that should really scare the crap out of you. So I urge you guys and women, both listeners, to go and educate yourselves. So please go to the intelhub.com, go to federaljack.com, go to oriontalkradio.com, and educate yourself. Listen to the shows, read the articles, copy them, start your own website, do link backs, make YouTube videos, get out there with a bullhorn, hand out DVDs, do something, stand up and fight this, because, all these movies we watched as a kid growing up, when I was a kid anyway, they're all coming true. Stuff that we were like, that'll never happen in this country. We're the United States of America. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? It's here. So it's time to stand up and fight. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.